Hello, Brandon Harvey here with this week's episode of Sounds Good, the podcast where every single Monday I sit down with an inspiring person and talk about happiness, overcoming struggles, and living a life of intentionality and wonder. This week on the podcast, I have Timba Smits. Timba is an award-winning designer, artist, illustrator, and part-time crime fighter, we'll get to that later, based in East London. He's also the creative director of the magazines Little White Lies and Huck. I could get into Timba's accolades, founding and self-publishing the self-entitled magazine Wooden Toy Quarterly, and his work with some of the world's largest brands, including the New York Times, ESPN, Wired Magazine, Esquire, The Guardian, Men's Health, and Johnny Cupcakes. And all of that would be great, but I'd rather brag on Timba as a person. Timba has been a welcoming and generous figure in my life since we met a few months back. He has an incredible story of sticking up for people, overcoming pain, and continuing to create art and give back to his community. I'm really excited to introduce you to my friend Timba. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into this. I am on the line with Timba Smits from London. Welcome to the show, Timba.
Thanks, Brandon. It's great to be with you.
Man, this is so fun. I'm so glad that we're talking and catching up. You and I first met in Australia, like 2 months ago now?
Yeah, I can't believe 2 months has gone by, but yeah, that was 2 months ago we met in Brisbane in Australia.
Yeah. We were both speaking at a conference, and we met at the hotel we were both staying at, and we shared an Uber together, which was a beautiful, wonderful experience.
Yes, I remember coming downstairs and not really knowing where to go or who was meeting me, and I see this lovely young chap and his lovely young wife sitting on a couch on the other side of the room, and I went up and introduced myself, and because I knew you were one of the other speakers, but I hadn't met you at that stage,
and because you're also the friendliest man in the world.
Friendliest, tallest man in the world.
Friendliest, tallest man.
Which makes me kind of like that movie that's out at the moment.
The BFG?
The BFG, which I'm going to see on Thursday night. Very excited.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
So yeah, I waltzed over, asked if you guys were going to the conference, and yeah, next thing you know, we're in an Uber together. And that's how it all started.
And on that Uber ride, we told you that after the conference was over, we were going to go to Melbourne, which is the Australian way of saying Melbourne.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. You like that? That's how we Americans say it. Melbourne.
Well, it's the correct way of saying it. We're just lazy and we shorten everything to Melbourne. If your name's Stephen, we call you Stevo. If your name's Damien, we call you Damo. Yeah, your name would be Brando, not Brandon.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds about accurate, actually. Everything was shortened.
Fantastic.
But so, yeah, we told you that we were going to go to Melbourne, and you told us that that's where you're from. And I gave you my phone number, I gave you my email, and you said you were going to reach out because you used to live in Melbourne, and you had some recommendations for us. That's
right. I mean, when I met you guys, I just thought these are, people I don't want to just, briefly meet in an Uber and at a conference in Brisbane. I just, when you get that feeling when you meet people and you're just like, I want to spend more time with these crazy kids. And I heard you were going to Melbourne, and I thought, well, heck, I'm from Melbourne, and there's nothing I love more than giving people like little hints on where to go to have the best experience.
Yeah.
And I love my home city. I left Melbourne for London, not because I didn't like my city or, running away from family or troubles or anything. I just, I left for creative purposes, and I really miss Melbourne. And every time I go back there, I have such a hard time, I have to go back to London again, but London's exciting and Melbourne's exciting. And so, yeah, when I found out you were coming down, I was like, well, you have to see my exhibition. I just opened it a week before, just before coming up to that conference, actually, and where we met. And I also, gave you I remember giving you a couple of recommendations of places to go.
They were amazing.
Gave you the address of the gallery, which you went to, which was amazing.
Yeah, we got off the plane, and the first thing we did was we just said, take us to the gallery, to our taxi driver. And it was amazing. We loved it.
That's so cool. And then, yeah, I gave you the address details of where I was having a going away party with all my friends and family. And I didn't think much of it. I was just like, hey, come. And I, completely forgot that it was literally going to be all of my family and all of my friends. And I sometimes forget how daunting that can be for some people. I did the same thing when I met my girlfriend for the first time. I was like, hey, first date, why don't you come to this, this exhibition opening that I'm going to be at? And then when she got there, it was like, I want to introduce you to my cousins. These are my friends. And she was like, oh my God, first date. What's going on?
We were so honored by it, though. We were blown away. We're like, we're in this other country, and this guy invited us to meet his family and to eat. What did we eat with you? Chicken parmas?
Chicken parmas.
Explain what that is for me again, because I don't remember anything other than the fact that it was delicious.
It's basically the breakfast or lunch or dinner of champions. You can eat it any time of the day. Whenever you want. Heck, you can have it as a midnight snack if you want. You can have it for 11sies in between breakfast and lunch. Whatever you want. There's no rules when it comes to chicken parmas. So basically, a chicken parma is a oven-baked chicken escalope, so it's like crumbed, and it's got parma ham, which is where you get the parma in chicken parma from, with a Napoli sauce covered in cheese, oven-baked, sitting on top of the hugest stack of French fries. And then it comes with a little bit of a salad because it's not really the healthiest meal, but it's the tastiest meal. And it's something that you have to do. Anybody that is going to Australia, you can find a chicken parma almost anywhere, but the best ones are in Melbourne, for sure.
Well, and we ate that, and it was incredible, and met your friends and your mom, and it was a wonderful experience. And so that was the moment where I was like, this dude is amazing, because you just invited us into your family, and you invited us into your life, and you didn't know us at all except for an Uber ride and maybe seeing me talk on stage.
Yeah, I mean, it was so fleeting when we met, but I just, I really, I'm big on energy, and I picked up great energy from you and Sammy, and I just wanted to see you again. And it was just, it was meant to be. You guys are going to Melbourne. We got the chance to hang out for an afternoon, and here we are 2 months later having a fine conversation about it.
It's incredible.
It all worked out for the best.
So the conference that we spoke at was a design conference, and I'm not a designer, but you are an incredible designer. And I want to get some backstory. How did you get started in the design world? And more so, I want to say, like, what was it at a young age that formed the way that you saw the world? Because you've got a very unique style to the type of art that you create.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I mean, we met at a design conference. It's called the Design Conference, but I like to think that it was all forms of creativity. I mean,
Totally.
you're a designer as well. Like you design stories. You take amazing photographs. There's a designer in you. There's a designer in everyone. Anybody that loves to clean a lounge room, they're a designer. So, I mean, we look around and everything's like designed in some way, shape, or form. But it's funny because I don't really call myself a designer. I never really know what to call myself because I do so many different things. Lately, I've just been throwing around the idea of saying, hey, I make magic with a pencil, or I make magic with a Wacom tablet. And because I grew up drawing and then I moved into painting when I was at high school. And then after high school, I wanted to be the greatest painter that ever lived. And I knew that, it was going to take some time. And so I studied graphic design and learned how to use the computer for the first time. After saying in year 11 that I would never, ever, ever touch a computer, those things are for losers. Quote, I said that at one point, and here I am, 20 years later, and I've built a entire career out of using the computer. But I do so many different things that I'm more of a painter, an illustrator, a graphic designer, an image maker. But I guess it all sort of started when I was at high school. I had an amazing art teacher and I had an incredible graphics teacher, and the two of them were my first mentors. I remember my art teacher saying, Timba, you don't need to go to art school. It's a waste of time. Just go out there and do it. And I mean, what teacher says that? It was incredible. I guess because I just showed such passion and persistence and experimentation at high school. He felt like I'd actually be restrained if I went to college.
That's good.
And they tried to teach me via a textbook. So it was in year 11 when I had the first light bulb moment. It's a funny story. I call it the Mr. Barron incident, and I think I talked about this at the conference.
Yeah, I think I remember this now.
Yeah. It's part of my I do talk about this when I speak at events, because it literally is the foundation. It's where everything started for me. So I was into drawing, I was into art, and I had an amazing art teacher, and in an amazing art room, had all the materials there. And my friend Craig, who didn't study art, he was really big into football, and he was telling me that like every Friday night, that the Australian Football League have this banner competition, right, where you can paint your team banner. Now, I wasn't really big into football. I had a team, and so we painted this banner for Craig's team, being the Essendon Bombers, they're called. And I remember it was for this player who had hurt his knee, and he was out for the entire football season. And so I painted him onto this huge 2 meter by 2 meter canvas. And it was Michael Long, who's an Indigenous football player, dressed up like the Terminator, spinning a ball on his finger, riding a Harley Davidson, saying, "I'll be back."
No, this is incredible.
Yeah. We haven't got to the most incredible part yet, but I'll get to that. Now, Craig went to the football match. I stayed at home to watch it because I, wasn't really into football all that much. Now, I'm sitting there watching the football, and the camera pans across the crowd, and there's Craig and his friend holding up my banner. And it was a pretty proud moment. I mean, this is being watched by millions of people like throughout the country. And then if that wasn't enough, Bruce McAvaney, who is this like all-time legend football commentator. I don't know who's like the big football commentator over there in the States, would you say?
I have no idea because I am the worst sports fan ever.
Hey, I'm in that club. Don't worry. It's cool. Well, he's a big deal basically. And he stopped on our banner and said that this was the winning banner, and it was the best banner that he'd seen all season. And
incredible.
Yeah. I lost it. I remember screaming out to Mum, like, "Mum, come here, this is amazing. Bruce McAvaney just said my banner's like the best banner he's seen all season. Oh my gosh, we won. And so the prize was this like $1,000 voucher for a sort of like I don't know. Do you have B&Q over there?
No, I don't think so.
Or Bunnings at all? Like these big sort of like warehouse tools shed. So basically DIY home furnishings, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So we won this $1,000 gift voucher for that because they were the sponsor of this banner competition. Anyway, I remember going into school on like Monday, and just everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, it's amazing! Yours and Craig's like banner won. This is so cool. Like you're famous, rah rah." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know about that." But the craziest part was going into the art room and everything just like piecing together, because to paint the banner, I stole some of Mr. Barron's canvas to paint it, right? Now, and little did I know that Mr. Barron's football team was the Essendon Bombers, and he was the biggest football fan, and he was watching the football that night. And on Monday, he put 2 and 2 together. Craig and Timba's banner won. I'm missing 2 meters of canvas. The banner looked about 2 meters. And so this was a funny moment because Mr. Barron was like so angry but so proud of us at the same time.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and he was like, "So, what are you going to do with like the $900?" And I was like, what do you mean $900? It was 1,000. And he goes, no, it's 900 because you got to pay me back for the canvas that you stole. And that was like the first moment for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I've just done something with my art.
Yeah.
Like something big. This has just gone from like me doing something fun and actually like making a career out of it. I can do this. This can be my job. And that, yeah, I've just basically followed that same, mentality all the way through till now. Like I make money out of having fun, which is incredible.
That describes you so well. You make money out of having fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's never really felt like a job to me ever since, high school. It's been hard work, but never really felt like a job.
At that point, did you feel like you were just on a separate path? Did it feel like, I guess what I want to ask is, did you feel different than your peers at that point? Did you kind of veer into this different direction?
I felt really privileged. I felt really lucky that, I had this sort of talent. And I never really knew where I got it from. We have a few creative people in our family, but nothing along the likes of drawing or painting or design. And yeah, I guess I really enjoyed, finally feeling like I had a purpose, that this was all meant for something big. And you know what it's like when you're growing up. Some people like find their calling like so early in life. Some people, I've got friends who are still, like traveling the world, just trying to work out what they're doing. And that's totally fine, because one day it's going to click and they're going to find something really awesome. And, they've spent all their youth like traveling and experiencing and having all this fun. And I've sort of been the opposite. I've worked really hard. I've been very career driven and had a lot of fun in the process, but haven't, like traveled the world as much. And I guess personally, I felt really lucky that at such a young age, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, because that suited me really well. And up until I was 18, I was actually into tennis, like in a big way. And I was either going to be a tennis pro or an artist, and they were both competing. And then this banner thing happened with Mr. Barron, and I, at the time, was getting a lot of back injuries from playing too much tennis, which I still, deal with now. I got a bad back, but I just thought, I think I'm going to do better in life as an artist than I would as a tennis player. So I chose that, and I'm so glad I did.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, okay, and so let's fast forward a little bit. How much longer did you stay in Melbourne before you jumped over to London?
Cool. I stayed in Melbourne right through till I finished school in like 1998. I studied like graphic design in 2010, and then between 2010 and 2009, which is when I left to come over here to London, I did lots of things. I, worked as a graphic designer. I opened a couple of art galleries. I started a magazine, and eventually that magazine took me to London.
Which magazine was that?
So this was called Wood and Toy Quarterly.
Yes.
The only quarterly magazine to come out once per year. Proud of it. So I started that magazine with a friend of my brother's in 2005. He'd just come back from London, actually. And I was still, just kind of doing freelance design here and there, odd jobs for different studios, whilst painting and exhibiting my work and selling that. And sort of probably doing a lot more procrastination than anything really great at that stage.
Hence the only quarterly magazine to come out once a year.
Yeah. And so he came back from the UK and wanted to do something, and I wanted to do something, really meaningful as well. And so we put two and two together. He had a journalism degree, I had a graphic design degree and this art background, and it was totally ripe for a magazine. So we started one up, didn't really know what the hell we were doing. Heck, to this stage, I still don't know what I'm doing, but that's the beauty of it. And that magazine really took off. So between 2005 and 2009, I think they were probably my most formative years as a designer, as an artist. Like everything just started falling into place. I discovered I was very good at making magazines because I'd never done them before. And I just, approached it with a really sort of intuitive or intrinsic sort of approach. And I just went with my gut instinct and I created something that was purely different. And I think that set the foundations for like my style today and my attitude about creativity and my design process. And in 2009, I really wanted to grow the magazine overseas, but it was incredibly difficult trying to do that from Australia because not only is it so far away, there's a huge time difference. It's expensive to post magazines from Australia to anywhere in the world. And I was having a really hard time. So a friend of mine said, you should enter this like competition, Timba. And, I hadn't entered a competition since that banner competition way back in high school. And I thought, well, hey, it can't hurt. So
You're 1 for 1 so far.
yeah, true. And so the midnight of the deadline of this competition, I entered it. Classic lastminute.com. And yeah, I got a call up like that week saying, hey, you've been shortlisted. Like, we're going to fly you up to Sydney for this interview.
Wow.
So next thing, I'm on this plane going up to Sydney to pitch my dream to the British Council. So the British Council every year in Australia run this competition called the Realise Your Dream Award. And it's open to all ages. Or at the time, in 2009, it was limited to 30 years and below.
Okay.
But now it's all ages. And it's all like walks of creativity and all types of people. And my dream was to grow my magazine internationally and reach more people, engage with more people, and give more and more artists a platform to leap off. Because the magazine was all about art and design. And I profiled lots of young emerging illustrators and artists and established ones too. And it was a great way for them to launch their career. And I got so close in 2009, and I just missed out. I got to the finals of that competition, and I came runners up, which was still a huge achievement. Out of like the whole of Australia, I got down to like the final 12 people, and this is it's something that I've done my entire life, whether it be in a creative sense or whether it be in my personal life. You fall off the horse, get back on it again.
Yeah.
So I jumped back on the horse and I applied the following year thinking, well, I got so close last year. I've had a whole other year's experience and I've got 2 more magazines under my belt, plus, a gallery now and all this sort of stuff. And I went straight through. Like I got to the finals again and I ended up winning in 2010.
Incredible.
And it was the biggest achievement that I'd ever had. It kind of, it superseded my, my banner competition win. And yeah, I was given an all expenses paid trip to the UK to meet with, other magazines and galleries and distribute my magazine and have a launch party. And the most exciting thing for me was, I was given my ticket and the certificate for winning by none other than Kate Blanchett in person. She was one of the guests of honor at the awards ceremony.
So funny.
So I was sent to the UK by Galadriel, which is just incredible. Galadriel being, her character out of Lord of the Rings. So it was pretty magical. Yeah.
So good.
And 3 months later, I'm on a plane. I've left my life in Melbourne behind and I'm off to the UK. And originally the awards program was meant to be, you come to London for a couple of months, learn from peers, and then come back to Melbourne and adopt that, sort of adopt everything that you've learned and the experiences you had. But I got here to London, which is like, the front line of creativity, and just went, there's no way I can go back to sleepy Melbourne. I love Melbourne. It's got a great creative scene, but this is epic. This is like Melbourne on steroids.
It's next level.
Yeah. And here I am 7 years later.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so you were working on Wooden Toy when you first got there. That was kind of, you just dove all in.
Yeah.
And then Wooden Toy came to kind of a sudden halt in 2011, if I'm correct, right?
It did.
And you had an incident. Do you want to talk about your attack?
Yeah. I'd be happy to talk about my attack. I mean, it's pretty heavy. I'll try and keep it as lighthearted as possible. I mean, everything came to a halt at that point in my life. I mean, the first year and a half in London was just absolutely incredible. I mean, I was leaping from like rock to rock and just, getting further and further across this like huge river that I'd been trying to cross my whole life. Everything was working out perfectly. I'd launched my magazine. It got such a great like response. I'd been picked up by all these brands, like wanting to design for them as well. And I remember this one week, like sitting in my studio, I'd actually employed a friend of mine at the time as well, like Gordon, who, I've known for 10 years. And I felt so chuffed that I could give him this opportunity. And I was sitting there in the studio. Sun was coming through the window. We had Erykah Badu on. It was like late in the afternoon. It was really warm. We had a couple of beers. And I just went to Gordon, Flash. His name's Flash, as in Flash Gordon. I said, Flash, life is really, really great right now. This is so good. Like, here we are sitting in this studio working together. This is pretty awesome. I'm doing the work that I always wanted to do. Yeah, and things are really good. And then exactly like a week later, my life just got turned completely upside down. I was on my way to work to meet Gordon, who was already in the studio. We had a couple of interns coming in that day as well, I remember, for interviews. It was going to be a big day. I was on a deadline for a job and I was running late and I had to race for this bus. And I got on the bus and just how much different life would be if I hadn't got on that bus as well. So I raced to get on this bus and I just made it on. And I sat down and got my head in my phone because my girlfriend at the time, she was in New York. And I was going to meet her in 2 weeks' time, actually, for a 4-week holiday. And I was texting her. And then shortly into the bus ride, there was some commotion happening at the front of the bus. And I looked up and I saw these, 3 young kids just being stupid, being silly, abusing passengers, just messing about. We see groups of kids like this all the time. But this escalated. I kept a close eye on them. And at one point I was thinking, is the bus driver going to do anything soon? Because they just wouldn't leave anyone alone. Anybody that got on the bus, they were harassing them. They had their legs across the seats and just being stupid kids.
Yeah.
Until, a pregnant, woman got on the bus and, they said some horrible things to her, wouldn't move their legs. The pregnant woman got really distressed. And then shortly after that, an elderly passenger got on and they did the same thing to her. Well, I just couldn't stand it anymore. I stepped up out of my seat and I said, I cut it out. Like, pull your heads in. Like, would you speak to your grandmother like that? A really elderly pensioner, probably, in her 70s.
Yeah.
And she was just like, she was about to go out the door and into the other door of the bus, which is basically what they were saying, So basically, in an unsavory way, the kid was just like, fuck off, like, go get in the other door to this like pensioner. And it was at that point where I was, you just don't speak to people like that. And I just got up and said, guys, pull your heads in. And next thing, I diverted their attention, which is a good thing, away from the other passengers to me. And he, it's this one kid, Sanchez Brown, his name is, came pacing up to me at the back of the bus and I was sitting down, no threat, and got right up in my face, screaming, yelling, spitting in my face. And I was just like, okay, like, settle down. Passengers are on the bus now. Just, let's just be cool. And he was, verbally spitting at me. And then I just told him, listen, like, what's with this attitude? Just please go sit down so we can all go about our day peacefully. And I just don't think he liked being told what to do. He'd obviously, had a bad day, had a bad life.
Yeah.
And it just went tropical from there. Next thing you know, he's like punching me, throwing punches, lots of punches. I remember getting hit so hard that like I blacked out. My head hit the window and it cut open my right eye. And that's, I lost a couple of seconds. I didn't know what was going on. But then I came to it and he was still just, a barrage of punches. And at that stage, I got up out of my seat. And I think I, at first, like frightened him with my size.
Because you're a tall guy. You're a big guy.
Yeah. Tall Timba, they call me. And I think I threw him with my size. And I was in a daze, but my internal defensive mechanism was just like, you got to fight back, or this is this is not going to end well. And I'm not a fighter. I would never ever start a fight. I try to avoid them wherever possible. But in this situation, this is the first time in my life where I went, shit, I think I'm going to have to fight for my life here, And I got up and I sort of fell on top of him, and we fell into the seats on the opposite side of the bus. And at this stage, I didn't know what the hell was going on in the bus. I didn't know whether the bus had stopped, what the other passengers were doing. And I remember having him restrained. I had his arms down. He couldn't throw any more punches, and I felt like I had the upper hand until like one of his friends came up behind and like pulled my shoulders back. And at that stage, I lost my grip on him, and that's when it came out. He pulled a knife out of his pocket.
Oh, wow.
And stabbed me twice in the stomach. And at that point, it was really weird because he'd been throwing these heavy punches, and then all of a sudden it was just these really light pats. They felt really weird, and I was like, what's with that? And then we started, getting into a scrap again, and then I noticed blood, and I looked down, I just see blood just like pouring out of me, and I just went into a state of shock. I saw a knife in his hand, and I backed off, just going, dude, like, get the fuck away from me. Like, what the hell? And as I'm trying to get away, he comes at me and stabs me in the leg, like, again. And at this point, everybody was freaking out on the bus, screams, the bus had stopped. They hit the emergency exit on the bus and just ran for it. And then I try and find funny situations in everything. And I look back at this and just go, the funniest thing about that day was it was the first and only time I've ever gotten off the bus in my undies. So here I am 1 minute, like fully clothed on the bus, and the next minute paramedics are like pulling me off this bus in my undies because they've literally cut all my clothes off to try and, stop this, bleeding.
Wow.
And I was very lucky because it all happened just outside this fire station. And like firemen, paramedics, was that what you call them? Paramedics on scene. And if it wasn't for them, it could have been a lot worse because I was losing a lot of blood. And the paramedics, the hospital paramedics who arrived said if it wasn't for them, it would have been a lot more serious. So very thankful about that. And
are you aware that all this is happening at this point? Like, you're getting unloaded from the bus and...
literally in a daze. I remember being like, carried off the bus, put onto a stretcher outside, all in my undies, and then put into the back of this ambulance.
Man.
And taken off to hospital, which is where I spent, just over a week and a half. And it was really full on. It was, my friend Gordon was at the studio, not knowing what the heck was going on. He was trying to call me. And then he gets a call from this police officer who I gave my phone to and said, can you please call this guy and just let him know what's happened? And obviously, Gordon freaked out. He's raced straight to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then these poor interns turned up all day and there was nobody at the studio. So I felt really bad. I felt really, really bad for them. And, it's funny because I met this designer actually recently, probably... it would have been about 7 months ago, and her name seemed really familiar. And then I was having dinner with her and a friend and my girlfriend, and she just went, we almost met once before. And I was like, yeah, just thought your name's really familiar. And she said, yeah, I turned up that day at your studio the day that you got stabbed. Like I was
Whoa.
Coming to the internship interview. And I was like, no way. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so freaking sorry about that. Like you would have been waiting around for hours. Yeah. And it's little things like that kind of are a reminder to, I always have these constant little reminders about that day, about that attack. And, on a weekly basis, either by meeting someone or, somebody asks me how I'm doing or, I hear of another similar attack in the news and it takes me back. And, I'm just really connected to that day now. So yeah, I spent a week and a half in hospital, and then I spent a further 2 months just like rehabilitating at home, like not even being able to like stand up. Literally, my leg was in such bad shape that I just had to stay horizontal in bed for such a long time, and that's caused lots of like physical problems for me, like even now, which I'm working a lot on. The hardest thing was the mental side.
Yeah.
So at first it was just shock. It was just traumatic shock. Like, holy crap, I can't believe this happened. I'm in hospital. I'm pepped up on morphine, feeling pretty happy actually on morphine. And it was the first and only time I've ever had it. And I just remember just going, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I can hear every single bird outside, but the window's closed. What's going on? I've like grown superhero powers. Yeah, I just had to call everything off. I had to call my work off, like all the clients that I was working on. I had to tell, and I couldn't do it. I had to, like get Gordon to do it, like speak to my agent and then get my agent to get around to everyone to tell them what had happened. And yeah, it was just more of like kind of physical shock at first. And then there was lots of media attention. So I was very much like distracted by that. Lots of people asking me questions and interviews and whatnot, which I felt I didn't have to do, but I felt responsible to get involved in discussing like this issue and how we can potentially like overcome it and stop it from happening again to other people.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of that since. But the first year was spent really rehabilitating myself physically. I took a year off work. I stopped everything. I stopped my magazine, Wooden Toy. I stopped working for clients. Everything just sort of went off creatively. I didn't pick up a pencil for that entire year. I spent a lot of time doing Pilates and going to the gym for swimming and counseling, psychotherapy. Psychotherapy came later. I was doing counseling because it wasn't until a year and a half after my attack that's when I really hit the floor, like mentally. So I went through court cases and everything. My attacker was convicted. He's still in prison now and will be for a while longer. So that was all very hard, having to face him in court, going through that process. And then just, friendships like falling apart, like my girlfriend at the time who I was going over to visit in New York, well, we broke up because she didn't come back. And I took that really harshly. Yeah. And yeah, it just kind of messed everything up. Everything from career to work to friendships to relationships to my physical self to my mental self, everything just deflated.
And when I think of you as somebody who is optimistic and positive. And obviously you're able to look back and have a little bit of a sense of humor about getting off the bus in your undies and and other things. But when did that come along? When did this sense of optimism? Because it wouldn't be fair to expect that from you the moment that this happens. That would be...
I think anybody that bounces back after something like that and is just like super optimistic is fooling themselves. Like it's a invisibility cloak.
Totally.
And I probably did that a little bit in that first year through doing lots of Pilates and doing lots of gym work and swimming. And I felt actually, considering my injuries, which took about the first 5 months to heal, in the next 6 months of that first year afterwards, I felt physically the best I'd ever felt in my life.
Wow.
Because I was applying myself like 3 days a week to intense Pilates, swimming every day because I had nothing else to do. That's what I was focusing all my time and energy on. But then I realized that was my invisibility cloak. That was me going, I'm swimming away from my problems. I'm stretching away from my problems. There's going to have to come a point where I need to like face this, and get back into my creativity and, reconnect with people and all this sort of stuff. And I was going through some other troubles as well, like some visa issues, and I won't get into that in any detail. But my original visa that I came over to London was expiring, and so I needed to renew it. So I applied for a compassionate leave to remain visa to stay here in London, and it was towards the end of that first year after my attack, and I was still waiting for the answer to my compassionate leave to remain visa, and I got a letter back from the UKBA, and the whole time that I was waiting, they had my passport as well, so I couldn't go anywhere.
Wow.
And that was really hard. So I couldn't even go back home if I wanted to. And there were many times throughout that first year where I just wanted to. I just wanted to be with my family and my friends, and just, London was really difficult. And I got this letter back from the UK border agency saying that my application had been denied.
Wow.
They thought that my situation wasn't compassionate enough grounds for accepting the visa. It was outside the post office where I picked up that envelope where I crashed mentally for the first time. It was like the final kick in the balls that I didn't need. I'd gone through all this stuff, and the UKBA was saying that I had to leave the country in 14 days. And I was a wreck. My friends couldn't even talk to me. I literally couldn't stop crying. I just hid. I just hid away. And it was my friend Gordon who called my GP and said that, he was really worried about me, and arranged an appointment. And he took me down to my GP, and I saw my GP, and my GP just was like, yeah, you're not wrong. He needs some help. And she diagnosed me with everything: post-traumatic stress disorder, acute anxiety, depression, like the whole lot. Just basically went down the checklist and ticked all boxes. And yeah, she sent me off to a psychotherapist, which I saw for about 4 months.
Wow.
And kind of felt like that wasn't really helping. Psychotherapy wasn't for me. I was actually probably getting more help through friends and strangers. I had an amazing Pilates coach who became a great, mentor to me and helped me through a lot of stuff. And then the silver lining in the attack is I met all these incredible people. Like Brandon, if it wasn't, nearly 5 years later, I'm now thanking myself for that event happened in my life. Because if it wasn't for that day, I would not have met the people that I've met in my life since then.
Yeah.
And so in the darkest place, there's always a light. You got to find it, and often in those dark places, you're alone. Nobody's going to find that light for you. You got to find it yourself. And, and those lights are people. To me, it was people. Just meeting incredible people who supported me without any sense of they wanted anything from me. They just wanted me to get back on my feet and help me. And yeah. And so one of my proudest things in life was I was nominated for this award through a charity trust up in Dunfermline in Scotland called the Carnegie Hero Trust. Now, you might be familiar with the name Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah.
Carnegie Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Andrew Carnegie was a very, very, very well-to-do man. And during his life, at one point, he was, wealthier than your Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Richard Branson combined.
Totally.
His steel basically built New York, and Carnegie Hall and everything else in between. But what he was the most fond about was helping people and supporting people who risk their lives for the life of others. So he set up this hero trust way back in I'm going to say the wrong date here, early 1900s, let's just say. And through the course of the Hero Trust, I think there's been 160 people nominated and inducted into this Hero Trust.
Wow.
And I'm one of those
No
people.
way.
And
I had no idea.
this is the first time I've ever spoken about this publicly. I've always sort of kept that to myself, but it's, I have this certificate on my wall and I look at it every day, and it's a reminder of what I did. And that is the biggest silver lining, is that I did this really proud thing, and I should feel really really proud about that.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm feeling sorry for myself, or if I'm having a hard day and it's because, my physical injuries have flared up, or, like I'm just, stressed, and that can lead to this post-traumatic stress disorder, which I still like deal with, like even up until today. I look at those certificates, I remember what I did, and soon, those feelings just fade away. And then it's people like the Carnegie Hero Trust who I've met, who have helped me, and they're just wonderful people. And I would have loved to have met Andrew Carnegie.
Me too.
Sounds like an incredible guy. He was so fascinated with why some people would literally put their lives on the line for others and others don't. He was very kind of interested about that. So anyway, that is my attack in a nutshell. That's a very big nutshell. I think that went on for about 25 minutes.
Thank you for sharing, though. I mean, I know that that's not easy to talk about, and I know that that was a really hard moment. But that's something that I immediately admired about you is, first of all, the fact that you were attacked defending others and defending people with less strength than yourself. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. That you defended people who are vulnerable.
Yeah, true.
And I think that the courage you showed through the whole process of healing and recovery, even to today, is really beautiful and powerful. The way that you've got to overcome a lot. And you have, and you've remained optimistic, and you're not a jaded person.
Oh, thanks, man. I mean, yeah, I'm really chuffed with the way that I came out of it. I mean, it can go so many different ways when you're in the thick of that trauma.
Yeah.
And there were days, I won't lie, there were days where I just thought, I'm never going to recover from this. I'm never going to get back to my creativity. Even when I was like really pushing myself, like trying to apply myself to get back into my art. And this was like only 3 years ago. There were 2 years where I was just like, creativity was like just gone. And up until last year, I was still very much struggling with it. But now, and I'll get to that in a second, I'm like firing again. But I just remember through all those like dark times, just remembering I've been through probably not tougher situations than this, but tough situations. I went right back to when I was at like primary school and early high school, getting bullied by kids. Like, you wouldn't believe 6'6" me got bullied at school, but I did, like, badly. There's a point where I got like bashed so badly at school that, I had a fractured eye socket, couldn't see out of my eye. And, my mum and dad took us out of the school, and that kid had to come around and apologize to me. But I was always the kind of kid that if somebody apologized to me, I'd accept it, and they were my friend again,
Beautiful.
And this kid came around to our house after school one day after seriously injuring me to apologize for what he did. And I shook his hand and just went, do you want to go outside and kick the football? And that's just me. Like, I've been like that my whole life. I'm not one to hold grudges. From the day after my attack, I forgave Sanchez Brown for what he did. I've said that in the press. I hope that it's like, filtered its way through to him.
Yeah.
At some point, I'd like to say it to his face. There's part of me that wants to, go and visit him at some point.
Wow.
But that's, for another time. And so all this like sort of stuff was very challenging, and it took a lot of strength. And another one of the silver linings from this whole ordeal was it showed me just how like deep my strength reserve is. And that is really, really like inspiring. And it's helped me through tough situations right up until the present time. And so the creativity part, the problem with losing my creativity is I felt like I lost my identity.
Because you'd held on to that since you were super young.
Exactly. Since I was like 16, this was who I am. I'm an artist, right? Now, I was always unclear as to like, and still sort of, well, not anymore. I was always very unclear up until my attack, like where the artist me ended and where I started, or the other way around, where I as the person ended and the artist Timba started. Whereas now it's very clear. I know that I've almost separated my creativity and my personal self a little bit as a precaution to, if I ever lose my creativity again, that I can still function as a person.
Yeah.
You know?
Because your identity isn't rooted in it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I really didn't function as a person at all for 2 years there, and that was scary as shit. And I never want to go through that again. And I would never want anybody else to. And so I talk about this a lot, in workshops and talks about the importance of like going, hey, cool, illustration's my life, art's my life, but just what happens when it's not there? Just, make sure that you like keep something in reserve, like for the times where, you might go through something in your personal life that affects your creativity. Because I've always been really susceptible to the energy around me. Like, when it comes to my creativity, slightest little thing that's not right and my creativity just suffers. It could be something like, my brother's going through a hard time, or my girlfriend's going through a hard time, or there's something really horrible in the news. It distracts me. And so this was the biggest distraction ever,
Yeah.
And so, I've really learned a lot, and I've made a lot of changes in my life and my career. And I feel blessed because I've been given a second chance. This is like Timba version 2.0, like I was always very happy with who I was before, but I'm so much more happier in my life now as a person. Like there's not a lot that I don't like about myself, and I think that's really important to be able to like look at yourself and go, you know what, like you're well-rounded and you're doing good, just like keep, just keep doing this. Yeah, I lost that for a couple of years, but I'm glad I got that back, because I was really worried that I wasn't going to fish that out of the pond again.
I'm so inspired by the way that you came out on the other side, and I'm glad that you're able to see that you're able to see that you're worth admiring. Like, I don't know if that's weird to say, because it's like talking about you.
No, it's not.
But it's like, what a healthy thing to acknowledge your strengths in the midst of darkness.
Totally, man. Totally. I think it's, what's the right way to describe that? It's a really powerful feeling to be able to find a golden nugget in a massive pile of shit, basically. It's, how Australian was that? That was amazing.
That was perfect.
And I'm applying that. I'm applying that now to my career, and my life and my relationships with people. I mean, heck, I was always the type of person before my attack to invite a stranger to my going away party to meet my family. I was always that type of person, right? But it's something that like I almost seek out now. I feel like I have a little bit of you in me as well, Brandon, and that is like I really like being around inspiring people. I haven't got like much time for like people who are just like sort of wasting their time, because my time was threatened in such a big way, that I have like an acute radar for like time wasting.
Yeah.
And so every minute and every hour that I'm here, I need to be doing something meaningful, positive, creative, and spending my time with like meaningful, positive, creative, inspiring people.
And so with that in mind, what have been some of the highlights of what you've been doing the last few years? Some of the things that you felt most proud to put your time and energy into, the relationships you've most felt proud to be surrounding yourself with?
Yeah, I mean, great question. There's quite a number. I'll focus on two. I guess some of my proudest moments over the last few years was joining a company called the Church of London Publishing here in London.
Which is not, in fact, a church. It is a...
No, it's not a church. No, it's got nothing to do with religion. It's just, magazines again, design, and we do graphic design, illustration, and branded content for clients all around the world. So I joined them in 2013. It wasn't something that I was seeking. They just sort of happened to pop up at a right time in my life. So up until 2013, I'd always worked for myself. I'd never had an employer. I'd work freelance, so I had contracts with like employers, but never like really a full-time job. And in 2013, it was 2 years after my attack, and I was still very much like, sort of unsure creatively. I wasn't firing. I'd started doing some work, and I'd been involved in an exhibition here and done some client jobs, but nothing like really big, nothing to like really challenge myself. And let's just go back to 2012. My good friend Gordon, who helped me out of a lot of shit, who I mentioned earlier, he went through his own struggles. So directly a year after my attack, he was around at my house and he had a seizure.
Wow.
I didn't know what the hell it was at the time. And yeah, a couple of months later, we found out that he had a brain tumor. That was really messed up. And he's gone through a lot himself. We both have, at the same time, and we've helped each other through a lot. In 2013, at the height of our frustrations, we decided to do something positive. So we put on this huge exhibition called the Not for Rental exhibition. And it was 220 artists, and the exhibition was inspired by our love of film. And we decided that the medium would be VHS tapes. So people were to design, so people were to design an artwork based on a film they loved, but make it as if it was the box cover. And
I love
we
that.
set up a massive VHS video library at this gallery in East London called 71A. And little did I know that that would be like my home for the next 3 years up until today. So we threw on this massive exhibition. It was a huge task. We pulled together like 250 artists, and we had to send 10 emails to each of those artists. So you can do the math. That's a lot of emails. We put on this like hectic show that just got the biggest turnout and the biggest response from our audience and online, and everybody wrote about it. And it was really great for the both of us. If anything, it was a nice positive distraction from everything that we were dealing with in our personal lives. And we teamed up with an organization called Art Against Knives, which is an organization that I've been involved with here and there throughout the last few years, and Macmillan Cancer Support. So two charities that both myself and Gordon are really passionate about because they're, connected to the things that we've been through. And yeah, we did workshops and we had some film nights and talks, and it was incredible. And towards the end of the exhibition, the editor from one of the magazines upstairs came down and he was like, Timba, we're looking for somebody to design the next issue of our magazine because our creative team have disbanded and gone to start up another studio. And I said, I'd absolutely love to, but I'm not creatively firing at the moment. I'm doing this exhibition. Sorry. And they were really desperate for somebody to do the cover. So I said, look, I'll do the cover for you. And that's how it started. So I did the issue 48 cover of Little White Lies magazine. And it was Matt Damon in the film Elysium, I remember. And I really struggled because that was the first commercial job that I'd done since everything. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. I remember drawing that picture going, it doesn't look like Matt Damon. I'm shit. I can't draw anymore. I went through every emotion you can think of.
And I've seen this cover and it's amazing.
Thanks, man. And I got through it and everybody loved it. It got a really great response. And next thing you know, they're offering me to design the next issue again. So they got somebody in freelance to do the issue 48, the whole magazine. And issue 49 is when I started with Little White Lies. And it's really funny that the first issue of Little White Lies that I did starred Cate Blanchett on the cover.
No.
And you might remember my story earlier on about Cate Blanchett giving me the ticket to come to the UK. Now, I'm just a sucker for that universe stuff.
Oh, that's beautiful.
This is meant to be. And I didn't illustrate Cate Blanchett myself because I felt like I wasn't really firing creatively yet. And I felt like there was somebody who could do it justice. And I reached out to, you know, an old friend, Kelly Thompson, who's an amazing illustrator, originally from New Zealand, now living in Australia. And she just smashed it. Like, and for the last 3 years, I've been working at this great magazine, Little White Lies, and designing and also art directing other illustrators to create these beautiful covers and magazines based on our love of film. And it's never like really felt like a job because I love movies. I love drawing. Put two and two together. Well, that's a nice little slice of heaven pie right there. And it's also an extension of what I really loved about working on my magazine back in the day. This is giving other illustrators and designers a platform to leap off. And I've loved my job, both drawing and illustrating the covers and the illustrations myself, but also giving young graduates and local illustrators and emerging artists the chance to have their work shown, you know, in a very credible magazine, and on the world map as well.
Beautiful.
And that's like that's something I've always been really proud of with, like, you know, my career, is that it hasn't just been about me. It's been about, you know, so many amazing, talented, like, creative people who I've had the pleasure to meet in person or online and collaborated with and talked to and learnt from, and hopefully they've learnt something from me. And yeah, it's been a really great journey. So that's been, like, you know, one of the big, huge positive changes in my life in the last, like, 3 years. That's been really great for me. And it came along at the right time when I needed to be around people, inspiring people, because up until 2013, I was just seeing my girlfriend and my cousin and Gordon. That's it. You know, my family were all back in Australia. And so being around a whole bunch of new inspiring people who are all doers and makers was really good. It allowed me to come out of my shell again. I learned so much. I learn so much still. You know, everybody at work is always able to surprise you. The other thing that I'm probably most proud of over the last few years, and I touched upon this when I talked about working with an organization called Art Against Knives. There's another organization that I've worked with over the last few years as well called Saracens. Now, Saracens is a charity that's set up to sort of intervene with young kids at risk of turning to crime by using football and sports.
Wow.
Art Against Knives. Yeah, Art Against Knives is probably a little bit more self-explanatory. They use art to intervene with young kids at threat of turning to crime. So I've worked with them. I've done workshops, like, with Art Against Knives. I've been involved in exhibitions with them. I've talked to a lot of, like, you know, their kids that they sponsor. And same thing with Saracens. I've been with Saracens. It's a little bit more heavy. It's like I've been involved in reenactments where I've, you know, gone to sort of a theatre set up in a park, and there are kids invited from local colleges, and there's police and paramedics on site, and there's an ER room set up. It looks like the real thing, and a reenactment goes down from the moment a fight erupts to somebody being stabbed, to them getting rushed to the hospital and in the ER room, and that kid losing his life and the doctors explaining why. And yeah, I've sat through these reenactments, and then I'm invited to come up on stage after that reenactment as somebody who went through that whole ordeal and talk to them about the ripple effect that it's had on my life as a survivor and the ripple effect that it's had on everybody that I know, in a way to, like, make these you know, these young kids, like, think before they act.
Totally.
You know?
And I would imagine that when you're in a situation where you're willing to stab someone, you're also in a situation where the people around you they've lost their humanity, you know, and that's a result of so many things. And I would imagine this experience of hearing from you brings that humanity back into their life. You know, it almost brings color back into their world.
Totally, man. Totally. And I'm full of color. You know, I love color. And yeah, and I think that's a real powerful, like, tool and skill that I have at my disposal. Is this experience allows me to be able to, like, connect and be very direct in ways to overcome these issues, this violent crime. And I want to get involved in that more. Like I really want to, step that up. I want to start doing more and more talks, more and more workshops. But at the moment, like, I'm still just very much getting back on my feet.
Yeah.
The dust is settled. I'm back on the saddle. I just want to ride for a bit, and before I like kind of set about that, because it can be quite draining on me,
yeah.
Physically and mentally. I remember, like after those few reenactments that I did, like for a couple of days after, I'm just exhausted.
Yeah. As you should be.
And I guess just with my job and my responsibilities at the moment, and at work, and also in my private life with my freelance work, I can't afford to have 2 days where I'm just absolutely wiped from talking about this really emotional subject matter. Yeah.
Man. And with that said, once again, I'm incredibly honored that you exerted the mental energy and the work that it takes to rehash this and to process through this. And I just really admire the fact that you haven't let fear stop you from doing things, and you haven't let the pain stop you, and you've just continued to push for relationships and impact and creativity despite all of this. Like, once again, thank you.
Thanks, man. I mean, that means a lot. And I mean, it's, yeah, I sometimes find it hard to put it into words, but I know that we've spoken mostly in this conversation about my event, but also about how it's, triggered silver linings and also things I've learned about myself creatively. So I know that, we've talked a lot more than just about that, but yeah, I enjoy talking about it now.
Good.
It's not something that I tiptoe around on around of. I know that this can be inspiring to others, and so it's something that I feel like I should share, because it might help somebody else who's going through a really dark time and looking for that light. And heck, if my story is that light, then awesome. That's something to be proud of.
Beautiful. On that note, I'd love to transition to every single episode. I ask 3 questions to every single guest. And my first question is, how would you describe the kind of person you most admire in the world? And actually, now that I think about this, I would love to ask this in 2 parts. One,
cool.
You have this beautiful, amazing gallery show that Sammy and I went and saw when we were in Melbourne called Role Models. And it's really cool. It's this beautiful art where you've basically shown some of your favorite actors. Actually, I'll let you describe it, because I'm sure you can describe it better than
yeah.
me. But I would love to hear you speak a little bit to these larger than life role models, as well as just in general, the kind of person that you most admire in the world.
Yeah, sure, man. No problems. I mean, the exhibition Role Models came about through my love of film and how I've grown up on a very, very, very healthy diet of movies. And and I just thought one day, very deep, almost like stoner thoughts, wow, what if Arnold Schwarzenegger never lived? What if Bill Murray never lived? Or if they did, what if they weren't who they were? Would I be the person that I am? Because over the years, 25, 30 years conditioning watching movies, that has had some effect on me, just through some of the things that I say, silly voices that I do, the way that I communicate with people. I like to think that I learn a lot of these things from the movies that I grew up with and the actors that portrayed the characters in these films. So I set about doing this exhibition called Role Models, which is inspired by all of my favorite movie characters and all my favorite actors. And compositionally, they're put together like an exquisite corpse illustration. So it's taking, the torso, the shoulders and neck and the top of the head of different subjects, and then mixing them together to create a new character. So I would take, Arnold Schwarzenegger's head from Conan the middle part of his face from Terminator, and then his torso from Twins, and going, voila, a whole new Arnold Schwarzenegger character.
And the fun part was at the gallery, it was interactive, and so we had these little sheets where it was like you would try to guess what movies you were referencing in each one of these things. And I'll be honest, Sammy and I did it terrible. I'd say we got less than 50% of them, but that's just a lack of our movie knowledge. And it was so fun, though. It was such a cool experience being there and seeing other people around us geeking out about all of these role models.
Yeah, I mean the trivia, like the quiz sheet, was like so much fun. It was something that I thought of like late in the planning stages, and I went, "There's 10 artworks. There's 30 films that are referenced throughout those 10 artworks. Like, I wonder if people could guess them." And I put together this quiz sheet, and there were a couple of people that got really close, but then there was one guy that got them all right. No. And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing!" And he got a free print of Bill Murray.
Dang.
So. Lucky him. The other, like, sort of really fun thing was, getting to watch these films again and some that I hadn't seen in a while. And then also, like on the opening night, I had popcorn and, just really sort of themed the exhibition around my love of movies. And it all goes back to, my mum. Like, I vividly remember my mum saying this one day, like, "Boy, if you could remember your homework as well as you remembered lines from movies, you'd be like a rocket scientist." And so, outside of like art and design and snowboarding, like I love to snowboard, like movies are my next like favorite thing to like consume. Like I just love watching film. And so like working at Little White Lies is like just such a awesome like gift. So, I mean, to answer the other part of like your question, I mean, my favorite type of person is a role model. Role models come in all different like shapes and sizes. So I had like two amazing role models at high school. I talked about them earlier, Mr. Barron and Mr. Flanders. Like, so much so that I've created a little brand for myself, which I haven't yet launched, and it's inspired by their names. But then I had a role model during my rehabilitation after my attack in an amazing fellow called Johnny Kennett, and he was my Pilates coach, and he was my psychotherapist as well. And then there's like role models at work, and my favorite type of person is somebody who goes out of their way to do something for other people without any expectation.
Beautiful.
Like a mentor, a role model type. Yeah. And I sort of strive to be one of those myself.
So I think this transitions actually really perfectly because you love movies so much. I want to know, like, what are you consuming right now that's really inspiring you? What's a movie that you absolutely recommend?
Oh, well, at the moment, like I haven't watched a film all week. Probably for the last 2 weeks.
I thought you were going to say like, I haven't watched a movie in a year. Like, it's just no, I haven't watched a movie in a week. Okay, that's fine.
No, I haven't watched a good movie in a couple of weeks, right? But because I've been totally consumed on this Stranger Things TV show.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. It's like reliving my 80s all over again. my childhood. Like, it's amazing. Yeah, my girlfriend and I finished that last night. It was I tried to like consume it as slowly as possible, but it was so good we finished it in a week. Which I think is pretty good because some people at my work like finished it in a night.
And
I was
like, that's what all my friends did. And I'm still going. I haven't finished yet. I'm loving it, but Sammy doesn't like scarier stuff as much, and so I've been watching it alone, and so I've been kind of just slowly chugging along when I get a free minute here and there, and it's incredible. It's so beautifully done. The story's great. It's so visually compelling. I'm very impressed.
I was super impressed, like super impressed. But I think a film, like the last film that I saw, I've seen loads of films this year, but I think the last film that has just really stuck with me, because just really sweet and beautiful. And I love Cate Blanchett, but Carol, the film that we covered for Little White Lies just before Christmas, it's just so beautiful. I mean, it just like totally rubs me up the right way. It's set in the era that I love the most, like the 50s and 60s, which is where I pull a lot of my inspiration from for my art. So I'm just watching this movie going, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous. Oh my gosh, did you see that in the background? Hang on, I've got to rewind that and like pause that and draw that. Hang on, to the performances themselves, like from Rooney Mara and Cate Blanchett. And it's just so sweet. It's just such a beautiful love story.
That's great. That's a really good recommendation.
Have you not seen it yet?
I've not seen it yet.
Oh boy.
I legitimately
You're gonna love it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing it now.
I'm jealous that you haven't seen it.
Man, I'm psyched about it. The last question I want to ask you is, based on the ways that you've chosen to step out and live your life differently, what's one thing you'd encourage a listener to do in their own life today?
Oh, I just think live without fear, experiment without fear creatively. I think, fear is becoming a bit of a problem word. I think that, if you can just put aside all your worries and concerns about like, what people are going to think about this drawing, or what are people going to think if I say this, that's, just going to hold you back. And, I can say this on a much huger level, and I don't recommend everybody like doing it, but don't be afraid to like step in and stick up for people who are, in trouble.
That's beautiful.
Got to help each other out.
Man, live without fear and don't be afraid to step in. Well, with that said, Timba, thank you so much for being a part of Sounds Good. Thank you so much for inviting me out for chicken parmas, and thank you so much for being somebody that I admire.
Thank you very much, Brandon. I mean, ditto, man. I really, really loved that you and Sammy walked into my lives, and we'll see each other soon, I hope.
Sounds Good with Brandon Harvey is part of the Gradient Podcast Network and is created in collaboration between me, Brandon Harvey, and Gradient. Check them out at gradient.is. That's gradient.is. I just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning into the podcast this week. If this is your first time listening, please hit the subscribe button and tune in for next week's episode. If you've been listening for a while now, you're the best. Thank you so much to everyone who's been sharing these stories of inspiring people with their friends. And another huge thank you to the 125 of you, 126 of you who have given the show a review on iTunes in the United States. And also thank you to the hundreds more of you who rated the show outside of the United States. It's in a different list. I don't know how it works. But anyway, you are all the best. If you want to follow along with Timba's story and see more of his work, check him out on Instagram and Twitter at Timba Smits, and at his website, timbasmits.com. As always, you can click the links in the podcast show notes in your podcast app or at brandonharvey.com. If you want to follow along with my photos, Snapchats, words, and stories in general, you can find me on all of your favorite social media platforms. My name is at Brandon Harvey everywhere, and that's Brandon with an E-N. And with that, that's a wrap for this week's podcast. I'll see you next week when we get the opportunity to learn from another inspiring person. Sound good?